All right, so this is a fairly short talk, so maybe we can get back on schedule, which would be great for the next speaker. Okay, so given the title, there may be a little bit of confusion, but this discussion is not about solving software problems with the scientific method. If you came here thinking that I was going to get rid of all of your problems using this wonderful 7-step method, then oh well. And I am not quite this little happy man with the flask. I'm more like this guy. And this discussion is actually about, as I've written, the challenges facing the academic science software projects. And I'm going to go into, it's mostly about the challenges, but I'm also going to give a couple of the approaches that my group takes to dealing with them. I'm going to use Apache cTAKES, which, has anyone ever heard of it? Oh my gosh, wow. Okay, what do you do?
I read your board report every month. I'm on the
Okay, so rubber stamping is our business, as you know. Okay, very good, there's one. Is anyone, since I'm asking questions, is anyone here in academia? One, okay, what do you do?
Apache
Lucene, okay, but...
It's mostly about long-term archiving scientific data.
Okay, all right, very good, interesting. Okay, so I'm going to talk about Apache cTAKES just a tiny bit, and basically, this is one academic software, science software project, and as they say on drug ads, results are not typical. Okay, so first, a really quick introduction to Apache cTAKES. It's natural language processing for clinical documents, which basically means whenever you go to the hospital, right, and your doctor or the nurse or the therapist or whomever you talk to, sometimes it's a 1980s Coke machine, they will write down whatever you talk about, and that goes into the electronic health record. It's off on a database somewhere. Everything you say, everything they write about you. Okay, but basically then it's in English or some other language, and if a physician wants to go and look at things later on, they may not want to read the entire note if they're looking for just one specific thing that they may be interested in about you. Now, so cTAKES has the ability to go through those notes, take this kind of natural language, which is kind of obvious statement, and make something that's more codified out of it. And just as a really quick example, here we've got at the top, we've got a sentence: the patient underwent a CT scan in April, which did not reveal lesions in his liver. Okay, very easy for us to read it, understand it. Not so much for a computer. But what cTAKES does is, up there in the green, it has some natural language processing components that basically do a bunch of things under the covers to eventually get you this entity recognition, which is where it actually codifies some of these important concepts in the sentence. Then it goes to the blue, does a little bit more linguistic, fun informatics stuff under the covers. A bunch of it is machine learning and intelligence stuff like that. And then it can do things like create or report entity properties, like is this negated or not? In this case, lesions. They didn't have lesions. Okay, is it? Does it apply to the patient, or is it in family history, etc.? Then we have some other really specialized things that do, for instance, co-references, where that is, say, one thing in one part of the note is the same thing that's mentioned later on. Like in this case, it's the patient and his. Relations, like the locations of things, the degrees of things. And also temporality, which is a really big deal right now. We can identify events like CT scan, reveal, and lesions. Everyone believe that lesions is an event? Okay, you're all wrong. And times, April, right? And then temporal relations. So, This is the last time I'm going to show you this slide, I promise. On to the rest of it. Okay, so here's our home page. Looks great, wonderful. It's very generic, but it hits some highlights. Those highlights, do you see anything that's missing? What? Actually, I cut off a little menu that's on the top, but that's actually a good point. There is something really obvious that should be on there that is missing. 3, 2, 1. Okay. So I looked up the top 3 software products on the web. I don't know what the site was. It was the first thing that popped up. I clicked on it, and then I went to the home page for each one of those top 3 projects. I have purple arrows pointing to something very important in each of those home pages. In case you can't really make out from all the verbosity of the first couple, just look at the one on the top right. It's easy to use. Okay, so Sean, you're a committer. Why don't you fix this? Because it's not broken. This page is actually telling the truth. It's got software that is powerful, it's scalable, it's modular, but partly because of those 3 things, it is not easy to use. It's very difficult. And, you know, I have integrity, so I'm not going to change this. However, I am trying to make it easier to use. All right. Why? Why is it not easy to use? It has all that cool stuff. Okay. Where's that cool stuff come from? It comes from our users and contributors. And as academic software, we have a little bit of a different user and developer base. Basically, we are catered towards graduate students, postdocs, and instructors, and by that I mean professors or what have you. And those are all in bioinformatics. And also the occasional medical researcher. All right, so when do these people contribute to cTAKES? They contribute when it's in their best interest. All of these people have specific projects that come along. And if you're not, anyone has been in academia in terms of they have a master's degree or something like that? No. Yes. Okay, 1, great. All right, so for the rest of you, you're in school, you take a bunch of classes, and then you have to write a thesis. The thesis has to be on some wonderful topic, and you're going to show the world how wonderful you are by being the first and hopefully last to say something, right? And your schoolwork takes a certain amount of time. Research into the theory behind whatever it is you're going to write about takes a certain time. And then at the very end, you're going to say, write some software that does or proves this certain thing. And that's all well and good. But the problem is, once you're done with that thesis, once you're done with that project, you may put the code somewhere, but then you graduate, or you move on to the next project, and you forget about that code. No one ever picks up that code. Or let's say you do contribute to something like cTAKES. You're not going to be around to fix that code. Maintain that code. Basically, what we've got are a lot of drifters, right? It's cowboy software. You've all heard, you know, cowboy software development. Well, we've got kind of like the High Plains drifter, Clint Eastwood's coming in. They're very intelligent people, and they can do wonderful things. But then they leave the town without much of an exit strategy. All right, and what they provide is usually single purpose. And I've explained why. One thesis, give it and go. It's rapid development, good for agile programming, bad when you're contributing to a big project and it's just something you want to throw off your desk. And function over form. Okay, So rapid development, we get a lot of this. And if anyone's used Scrum or something like that, you probably recognize what this represents. We get a lot of software and components that are almost done. Students are great at doing this. They've got it most of the way there, but not quite. And they say, hey, we've got something awesome, we'll give it to you, perfect. But it's almost done. And we've got a lot of that. Function over form. Here's another problem with the rushed PhD student who wants to contribute well thought out theory in kind of poorly constructed code. It may do something wonderful, but if we can't easily plug it in or easily maintain it ourselves, then, this is an issue. And what this turns into, even with the things that we do plug in, this is a very simple dependency graph, just a couple dependencies through Maven. This is what cTAKES looks like, give or take. This is what it looked like a day before this, give or take. This is the same software, right? It's just that when everyone threw their stuff together, they didn't pay attention to kind of the fineries of software development. They didn't bother to coalesce, to kind of coexist with other pieces of software in the way that they should. Okay, so much for the integrity, right? Here's this slide again. What happens when there's software that does something wonderful and you're not a very good software developer, but you want to use it? You go in, you look at the software, and by the way, I said they're bioinformatics students, bioinformatics professors, medical practitioners who just kind of want to give something a try. They go into the software, and for one thing, some of it is just kind of that almost done stuff. Some of it can be really professional, clean, beautiful software, but they don't quite understand it. So, given the choice, do they, A, learn Java and figure out how it works? B, let's say, go find a software developer and say, give me some help, and let's do this together. Or C, maybe contact the authors or Apache software, the cTAKES group. It's actually D, none of the above. And the reason is because they don't want to learn Java. They have too much to do. They don't want to go find a software developer because, well, they don't know any, and that would take time. And what was the third one I said? Yes, contact the project. Okay, and this is important, especially if they're a professor or medical practitioner. They're proud. Okay? They don't want to ask for help and look dumb. So what they do is they say, okay, well, I can do this. I can do the same thing. And maybe I can even do it better. So they take software that's already been written for a certain purpose, and they say, I have that purpose. I'm going to write basically new software to do the same thing. Okay, so I'm showing this slide again. I told you I wouldn't, but, whoops. Okay, picking something simple. Okay, temporal extraction. April is in this sentence. It should be a very simple thing to say, I've got some text, get all of the temporal expressions, April, 2 o'clock, November, whatever, and pull them out, codify them. All right. This has been done multiple times. How many components do the identical process in cTAKES? Raise a hand to tell me to stop. 1, 2, 3, 4. 4. 4 different components do the same exact thing. All right, well, that's kind of a waste of code. All right, well, what about a waste of data and metadata? All right. In terms of storage internally, there are three ways to have this temporal data pervade through cTAKES, to say it's 2 o'clock here in the very beginning of this cTAKES pipeline, and later on to say it's still 2 o'clock. One data type, you would think. No, we have 3. Okay, now in these 4 components, do you think they use this data type natively, internally? No. They translate it into something else just for themselves and then translate it back. Yeah, fun stuff. Okay, so how do we stop all of this from happening? Basically, on the left, I've got a globe. This has people. We're global. We have people everywhere. And they want to do all kinds of different stuff. And it's really cool, some of these projects that they're doing. But they're kind of love them and leave them types. So what we need is a core team. And that's what we kind of have. The same person that started cTAKES still tries to maintain a small group of people to assist all of these others to kind of incorporate their new code, kind of use the existing code, etc. This is not unusual, right? I mean, we've all been there, done that. What's different, though, is we don't have the time. We're academics. We're just like the people that are contributing great but not so great stuff. So what we try to do is get grant funding specifically for cTAKES. And it's extremely difficult. So what we try to do instead, or when we can't do that, is we steer a project towards something that we can actually throw into cTAKES that would be useful for everyone. For instance, we've got a project funded to work with cancer right now. Well, okay, a lot of stuff in there is really cancer specific. But before we started the project, we said, okay, what can we do that would really add some value to cTAKES? Cancer, whatever, okay. Well, what about Neo4j? Can we output into a Neo4j graph? Yeah, probably. Okay, great. Let's do it for this project. Let's get this project funded and say that's one of the things we're going to do. Do we need to do that for cancer? Meh, not really. We can use any old kind of output, but throw that into the grant, get it funded, and wow, there we go. We've got some concerted effort we can put into cTAKES. All right. Now, this is for the, like I said, love it or leave it, the drifters, right? They give you this stuff that's still in the almost complete column of the Scrum board. How do you get them to complete it? How do you get them to kind of stay on the project long enough to roll it off the press far enough that the ink actually dries? You offer collaboration. Now, this is difficult because sometimes they're done with that thesis. They don't care about that topic. They used to work, or their thesis was on cancer, for instance, and they're already signed up to be a professor over at MIT, and they're going to be working almost full-time with, I don't know, let's say stomach flu. Doesn't matter. It has nothing to do with cancer. Why should they keep publishing about cancer? So that makes it difficult. It helps if you have a really good name and you can say, hey, publish with us. We're good to go. But there are other times when there are opportunities, kind of building off of the last presentation. We have a lot of international contacts, like I said. We have contributions and people that talk about contributions. We have actually had 2 different people contact us and say, hey, I've done this great stuff with cTAKES in Italian. I've made this module that will do things in Italian language with cTAKES. Cool. Hey, can we get it into cTAKES, into the main Apache repository? Oh, sure. And then you never hear from them again. So what you have to do is go back to them and say, hey, we see that you published in this Italian journal. Awesome. How do you feel about publishing in an American journal? Some of them have better name recognition or whatever. Why don't we put a slightly different spin on it, put it in the American journal, and then, you know, we'll collaborate, we'll work together, not just on the paper, but to get this software that you wrote into cTAKES. And that actually works. So the last thing that really helps academic science software, and I think we're kind of in a minority here, but I can really attest that it does. Previously, mailing lists were mentioned as something that's really beneficial because it kind of consolidates things in one area. Well, that really helps us because previously it had been email alone. If someone out in Johns Hopkins had a question, they would email me, I'd have to reply. Same question would probably be asked 3 days later by someone else, and I'd have to reply again. With the mailing list, it makes it so much simpler. The website homepage that I showed you, not beautiful, but it looks fairly professional, right? And that was with the assistance of Apache. All the web hosting, the wiki hosting, etc. This is all wonderful stuff that Apache does for us that oftentimes is not really well provided by an academic institution, believe it or not. And when it is, it's kind of haphazard and support is iffy, etc. So that was my rah-rah for cTAKES. Are there any questions? Wow, quiet audience. Everyone's prepping for their talk this afternoon. Okay. Well, good. Thank you.